What's going on, y'all? This is John Alsace with the Face Mask Podcast. Today, I wanted to do a backfield breakdown on the Arizona Cardinals, because we really haven't talked about the Arizona Cardinals outside of when James Conner just got signed, and I believe I did that video prior to him actually signing, and it was all based on speculation. But now that he's signed there, we've had the draft come and go. We've seen that the team didn't do anything to upset their current depth chart of James Conner, Chase Edmonds, Eno Benjamin, DJ Foster, Khalifani Muhammad, Jonathan Ward, and Tavian Feaster. Yeah, I got through all that. But that means that we really only have to look out, as far as fantasy is concerned, for James Conner and Chase Edmonds. Because I really don't even think Eno Benjamin factors in as anything outside of a very, very, very speculative handcuff in deep dynasty league. Now, everybody's super hype on Chase Edmonds coming into the season, and a lot of people think that James Conner is basically dead, but I don't think so. Let's start this off by digging into some comments from Chase Edmonds. He's come out and said, in this past offseason, quote, "I'm going to go out there and I'm going to ball this year. It's now or never. I may not be your typical 20 carry guy. Not every running back is a 20 carry guy, but I believe I'm certainly capable of being a 20 touch type of guy," end quote. He also went on to say, "We might not see him at the end of games since James Conner will be asked to wear down the stack boxes and in short yardage situations." But he did say, and this is a quote, he's going to be on the sidelines cheering nonetheless. So it sounds like a guy who understands that his role is never going to be that of a workhorse. Yet for some reason, fantasy circles are still so high on this guy, and while I understand some of the appeal, I think James Conner is going to eat into a lot more of his workload than many in certain fantasy circles would lead you to believe. It's pretty much expected that Conner's going to take over the Kenyon Drake role for Cliff Kingsbury. That was a pretty lucrative role last season, as Kenyon Drake finished the 2020 campaign as the number 15 running back in PPR leagues. It helped that he had 10 rushing scores in 15 games, but he also chipped in with 25 receptions, so that's a role that's pretty well defined. Chase Edmonds has already come out and admitted, basically conceding, that he's not going to be given a ton of work on the ground, that his value is pretty much all via the air. We hear people talk about LeGarrette Blount and his 18 touchdowns that one season with Tom Brady. All we're talking about is a battering ram. Ideally, the Cardinals will use Conner in that type of role, and in an offense helmed by Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, that's a position that can yield a lot of fantasy points. Conner will be looking at taking on the majority of the first and second down carries, and he's going to get all the goal line looks. I know he only played in 13 games last season, but he punched in 6 rushing scores on one of the worst run blocking teams in the NFL, and he caught 35 of 43 targets, which is not too shabby himself. Do I expect him to get those target numbers in Arizona? No, but when he's targeted, he's more than likely than not to catch the ball. I believe that Conner is a better receiver than Kenyon Drake, but Chase Edmonds has that role locked down. Chase Edmonds, in his own right, scored 10.5 PPR points per game as the Cardinals' RB2 in 2020, despite only receiving 97 rushing attempts. And kind of crazily, 25 of those 97 rushing attempts that he got all last season came in one game, Week 9. He had 25 carries and only took it for 70 yards, and this is against Miami. And Edmonds ended up having 6 or fewer carries in 12 of his other 15 games. So the coaching staff doesn't think that he can run the rock. That's pretty apparent. This is a quote from the coaching staff. "We all understand that he's unfortunately been nicked up a couple of times, which we want to keep him on the field, but we have all confidence in the world in Chase and him being able to be the bell cow if that's how this plays out." Note that last point, if that's how this plays out. That's how the quote ends. That's all very nice and good until you listen to that last bit where it's like, yeah, if that even happens. Yeah, we believe he could be good if that even happens. It's basically what he said. It's clear the Cardinals see Edmonds as a capable pass catcher out of the backfield. He saw 67 targets in 2020, 4th most on his team, and 5th most of all running backs. He finished 7th among all running backs with 53 receptions. He should absolutely remain the pass catching back for Kyler Murray. He won't see any goal line work. But if Conner were to miss time, or if Edmonds were to miss time, as both of these players have been kind of injury prone. Conner more than Edmonds. But if either of these players were to miss time, first off, I've already been over the fact that Conner is an underrated pass catcher. Conner would take over more of a bell cow role, but if Conner was out, I think they would bring in somebody else and keep Chase Edmonds in his role. So I believe there's even more benefit to James Conner than there is to Chase Edmonds, because whereas in the event of an injury to another running back, James Conner, his role would grow. Chase Edmonds' role would kind of stay the same. They don't like giving him a ton of work. That's clear. But James Conner, Chase Edmonds, both should end the season as RB2s, and I'm actually higher on James Conner. Last season, through 10 weeks, James Conner was the RB12. Then he got banged up, and he dealt with COVID, and he tumbled down the rankings the rest of the way because he couldn't find his feet But he was playing on a terrible run blocking offense, on a terrible rushing team in general, and was still the RB12, sandwiched right in between Antonio Gibson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, ahead of guys like DeAndre Swift, Chris Carson, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb. I just wouldn't be counting him out the same way that seemingly every other analyst in the fantasy community is doing so. Because at the end of the day, this offense is going to produce fantasy points. Nobody thinks Kenyon Drake's a great runner. He got 10 touchdowns last season. This offense will produce fantasy points. The rushers in this offense will produce fantasy points. They will reap the benefits of having Kyler Murray there. I know the narrative on Kyler Murray is that he's going to vulture rushing touchdowns, and sometimes he does. But I went over this with Nick in a past podcast. There are quarterbacks that vulture touchdowns as rushers, like the Josh Allens, and there are rushing quarterbacks that don't really vulture touchdowns because they're not built like that. Lamar Jackson. If you look in his MVP season, Lamar Jackson, incredibly efficient, but Mark Ingram had 13 touchdowns as a 29-year-old. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm too high on these guys? Do you guys think I'm too low on either of these guys? Put your thoughts in the comment section below. This is John Alsace with the Face Mask Podcast. Have a great day.